We're down to the final 2 episodes of the first season of the Echoes of Fear podcast. I am your co-host, Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Kenton J. Moore.
And we're going to get more serious than we have been for these last 2. We figured it would be good to close out our first season by talking about that which none of us can ever avoid, that is dying. The fear of death, which I think even someone who is highly religious or spiritual and is very confident in where they're going to go next still has trepidation about their own mortality. And that's sort of what we're going to tackle on these last 2 episodes of the season. The first, as always, being kind of more of a academic approach to the subject matter. And then part 2, which comes out next Friday, we'll have to look at death in popular culture, which pretty much is in every movie around, I think, in some degree, or story always touches on that in some capacity.
Yeah. And like, as Jason mentioned, the fear of death and the process of dying, which is, by the way, is called thanatophobia. The thanato, of course, being coming from the Greek mythology, Thanatos, which was the personification of death. Inspired Thanos from the comics.
I was just about to ask, right?
Just FYI. But thanatophobia is very different from necrophobia, which is the fear of dead things or places associated with dead things like graveyards and stuff. Thanatophobia is really more about the fear of dying and the fear of death as that final journey, that inescapable step that all of us take that none of us can escape.
Yeah, and that's like, what was that old saying? There's 2 things in life that are guaranteed: death and taxes.
Yeah, taxes.
Is there a fear of taxes? Did we ever come across a fear of taxes?
Well, yes, there is. I just, I don't have it here in front of me.
Season 2, folks. We'll talk about taxes. So what dirt did you dig up on death, Kenton?
This one was interesting, Jason, because of all of the phobias that we've talked about this season, of all of the 551 phobias that are in the DSM-5 and that have been named these days and all of that, death is really the driving factor behind almost all of it. As you mentioned in our earliest episodes, when you fear anything, it's that you'll die.
Death. All anxiety is death anxiety.
And I'm glad you just said that phrase, because thanatophobia in the DSM-5 is one of the few things that is legitimately categorized as a mental health disorder. And it is more commonly known as death anxiety.
Well, thank you. I don't know where I picked that up from, but
Yeah. So you might be interested to know too that, when it comes to death anxiety, and we're going to use that term as much or more as thanatophobia in this episode. But when it comes to death anxiety, actually only 3 to 10% of people feel that they are more nervous than others. Almost every human being has some anxiety over death. This has been studied since the dawn of time. Humans have been, obsessed with what happens after death since humans knew how to communicate with one another. Immortality and stuff, gold is as valued as it is because it is very synonymous with immortality, because it doesn't oxidize. It doesn't change. Once it's polished up and done, it's that way forever. And humans see its value as immortality, right?
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And, there's one of the most interesting things I came across was there was a 3-tier study done in an acute geriatric ward that showed that the elderly had lower levels of death anxiety than the others did. So there's a death anxiety scale. And it's an easy to do 15 question survey. We'll get to that in a sec. We have some fun for you guys with that. But the elders actually scored 4 out of 15 on the death anxiety scale. Their children scoring 6.9 out of 15 for themselves in their own deaths, and scoring 8.9 out of 15 for anxiety over the death of their parents.
Ooh, interesting. So it's almost like we're more afraid of losing someone else than we are our own death. Because we have to experience then all the grief and trauma that goes with that.
Yeah, and watching somebody that you care about go through that process really, really makes you stop and think about things. And I mean, to get a little personal here, and Jason, I know you and I have this in common. I lost my father recently, a few years ago to Parkinson's disease. And it was horrible to watch the suffering at the end, and it's weighed heavily on me over the years. And watching somebody that you care about go through those things really makes you stop and think.
It does, yeah. I mean, when my father died, there was no warning. He was like perfectly healthy, and I saw him at like 7:30 in the morning, and by 5 o'clock at night, he was dead, kind of thing. And that was more the suddenness of that could, to me, was that someone I loved could be taken at any time without any warning. Mm-hmm. And that to me is like the terrifying part of death, is that it can strike anywhere, anytime, any place. None of us who wake up in the morning are guaranteed we're going to make it to bedtime.
Yeah. And it's final, right? Like it's final, and it's sacrosanct. Like it's the end of all things, right? And Freud, Sigmund Freud, speculated that one cannot actually fear death because they've not died. right? But instead, that death anxiety resolves from unresolved childhood conflicts or some sort of triggering factor.
Well, there's an unfinished business maybe to it, right? That's, of course, then we talk about with our Fear of Ghosts episode, is that a lot of the times ghosts are portrayed as having some unfinished business or a wrong that needs to be righted before they can rest.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because the prevalence of whether or not you suffer from death anxiety in a heightened factor is entirely influenced by religion, spirituality, believe it or not, gender, psychological state, and age.
Okay, so are then men more prone to fear of death than women?
You are correct, sir.
I'm not surprised. And how about, I guess, obviously, if you are of more sound mind, are you afraid of death, or is it less sound mind?
Well, no. So it's things like disease. Like if you're say like you have cancer running in your family or heart disease running in your family, Parkinson's, things like that, then you're generally at more high death anxiety, right?
Because you're afraid that you then could have picked up the same. That was actually one of the things that spurred me to seek my birth family. Yeah. Is to find out if there's anything I needed to know about, not only for myself, but also that wouldn't pass down to my son.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so having lost my dad from Parkinson's, I had, crash course on all of it, and finding out that it's not genetic, but the markers for it are. But then recently my mother was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, which is genetic. And there we are, right?
Yes. Now that's very much on your mind. Yeah. And you probably shouldn't have had the double cheeseburger that you had for lunch.
I can feel it clogging my heart, right? But yeah, like it's interesting when you get into the gender studies and stuff too, that, the studies show that the higher rate of men for death anxiety, it's a higher rate of men throughout their entire life. However, women have a lower rate of death anxiety in their younger ages, but they spike much higher than men, often twice higher than men, 50 plus.
Okay, so as they kind of get further into their journey, it's more on their mind than earlier. Whereas I guess males, maybe it's in their brain, it's wired in our DNA to be a concern from the get-go. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it all comes down to, like the heightened anxieties, having your disease and suffering, related pain, state of those that are left behind, like if you feel like your children aren't prepared, like if you pass away, are your children going to be taken care of? Will your family be okay? These kind of things, they lead to all those. And, like I think personally, going off of the women in my life, when I talk to my mom, after having her diagnosis and stuff, her fears, her anxieties about everything are all whether our family's going to be taken care of. And I think like I'm not a woman, so I can't really say, but I think that it's that maternal instinct that is my family taking care of that really raises their death anxiety later in life.
I get that. If I were to go early, I'd be concerned just because I saw how my dad's death affected me and how it impacted my whole life. And then I watched what it did to my mom. You know what I mean? How would Jess respond and would Griffin do? I think that's a bigger one even than me going. Although there's definitely always a bit of concern. So you have this quiz, questionnaire thingy that you did. And now we're going to do it with me live here on the show. Well, live, quote unquote.
Yeah. So if those of you listening at home, grab a pen and a sheet of paper if you want to follow along here. What this is it's a death anxiety questionnaire, and it comes from the H.R. Weiner, MB, and Plutchik measuring. It's the report, the book that it came from. It's measuring death anxiety in a conceptual, psychometric, and factor analytic aspect.
Fuck. Leave it to those science and sociology people to use big ass words.
But it's got a really cool Woody Allen quote here at the top. I gotta say, It's pretty funny. It says, "I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens."
You know what? I was thinking of that quote just minutes ago when we were just talking about death anxiety. Anyways.
Okay, so Jason, how this works, and for those of you at home, I'm going to ask you 15 questions, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to give me a score between 0 and 2. You can do 0.5s.
Okay.
Right? 0 is going to be not at all, and in your answer to the question, and 2 is going to be very much. 1 is somewhat.
Okay.
Right?
Thank God it wasn't 1 to 10.
Yeah, no, it's pretty simple. It's 1 to 2 or 0 to 2, but. So the first question, everybody at home ready to go here. First question, do you worry about dying?
1.
Does it bother you that you may die before you've done everything you wanted to do?
0.5.
Interesting. Do you worry that you may be very ill for a long time before you die?
2. That to me is actually the worst part of my whole potential death is prolonged suffering. Yeah.
Does it upset you to think that others may see you suffer before you die?
0.
Interesting.
Because I'm a narcissistic prick.
Very interesting. Yeah? Do you worry that dying may be very painful?
2. But that ties into the previous one about the long suffering. Everything I understand about the moment of death is actually supposed to be you no longer care, like you're ready to go.
Oh. That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you worry that the persons closest to you won't be with you while you're dying?
I've never thought of that before. I'm going to go 0.5.
0.5.
Yeah. Freaking better be.
Yeah, right? Do you worry that you may be alone when you're dying?
0.
Does the thought bother you that you might lose control of your mind before death?
2.
Me too, with the Huntingtons and the Parkinson's stuff, right? Do you worry that expenses connected with your death will be a burden to other people?
0.
Does it worry you that your will or instructions about belongings may not be carried out after you die?
0.
Are you afraid that you may be buried before you're really dead?
What?
I know. That one got me too.
0. Like, the fuck?
I guess when the study was done, there was a lot of people getting like locked in syndrome.
No, I'm not dead yet.
I'm gonna let this one ride for a second.
I just think of that Monty Python, to bring out your dad. It's like, I'm not dead yet.
I wonder if that's where it comes from, or like buried alive.
Jesus, like what? Like in this day and age, I don't think that's a common problem.
I'm not making this up.
No, I know. I know. That was good.
Almost there. Okay, so does the thought of leaving loved ones behind disturb you?
1.
Do you worry that those you care about may not remember you after death?
0.
Yeah, it was that way too.
Fucking better.
For all the writing that we do,
Yeah, right.
like, you better know my
Film
name.
and all that. Like, you know.
Does the thought worry you that with your death you'll be gone forever?
0.
Yeah, or with the ghost hunting, right?
Yeah.
You have a spiritual background. So.
Yeah.
And the final question is, are you worried about not knowing what to expect after death?
I'd say 1. I believe that you continue on, but it's in what way, shape, or form. Okay, Kenton is counting up the score here to see where I rate on this chart. He's hopefully better at math than I am. How about you at home there? How did you do? How did you fill those out? If you want, on either our Facebook page or one of Kenton and I's personal profiles, leave us a comment or send us a message to let us know how you scored on this and what it means. Well, Ken's about to tell you what it all relates to here.
Yeah, so Jason, you scored a 10.
Okay.
Which, that's actually better than me. I scored an 11.
Okay.
I had a little bit more fear about on my questions. I had a little bit more fear about being forgotten, a little bit more fear about the pain and suffering, and others watching me suffer the way I watched my father suffer.
Gotcha.
But the national average is actually 8.5.
Okay, so we're slightly above average.
Yeah, we're slightly above average, but we're not in the vicinity of having to worry about thanatophobia or death anxiety.
I think our personal experiences, I mean, everybody experiences death, but, I've had a job where I saw that on a daily basis, so it's been more forefront in my mind. And I know that you've experienced your things too, Kenton, through your careers as well, right? And I think people that have worked in emergency services, medical, I think that have faced it more, I think it either like numbs them out or it's on your mind more.
Yeah. And like one of my favorite, well, I guess I shouldn't really call it a favorite, but one of my common sayings that I tell friends a lot is I've been to more funerals than weddings, by a significant margin. Like you mentioned, me having served in the military, the saddest part about that being that most of the people I lost that I served with were lost to mental health and suicide and things like that than they were actions of war. But I was exposed to death very early, very, very, very early in my life. Lost my grandfather when I think it was about 12. I had a friend take his own life by the time I was 14, and things like that. So I'd been exposed to it very young, and I grew up with it. So my relationship with death has been different than anybody else I know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I only have one other friend who I think, has experienced it as much or if not more than I have. But I same thing. My grandfather, Hewlett, died. I was in grade 8, so 12, 13, and he had a stroke years before. So watching that process. Then my father died when I was 19. I had some high school friends that had died either of a disease or through suicide, and then I ended up in a career where I was the crime reporter. So I had one day I went to 3 different fatalities.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like you see it. It's a real thing. And with that, there's a level of anxiety just from experiencing that kind of thing that I don't think you ever lose because you can't unsee what you've seen.
No, and that's one thing I was going to ask you is how your experiences in crime reporting had affected you that way.
Yeah, totally. It changed my worldview completely. I was nowhere near as cynical as I am now before that.
Yeah.
And part of that came from the frustration of reporting all these things. And you report, on accidents, not only to let people know that there was an accident, but in hope of preventing future ones. And I had an editor, Mel Rothenberger, who when I hit the peak of my depression assured me that these stories make a difference, but you never see that. No one comes into the newsroom to be like, hey, thanks for writing that story because I slowed down on Hoffman's Bluff in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where that kind of was born of.
And I can't even imagine what that must be like. You write all these stories about drinking and driving and still every day there's guys, people on the street that are driving drunk, and like for me personally, you see all these accidents on the highway with the semi trucks and stuff, and still you drive into Kamloops and you get passed by one,
Yeah, driving like a maniac.
it's just, it blows my mind. So for me, a lot of my, I guess, cynicism or uncomfortable emotions to do with death and dying is just when life is taken for granted.
Yeah.
I can't stand it when lives are thrown away, when they have no meaning, when death occurs just because,
No, I hear you. Like I think prime example when we were driving back from Enderby Litcong, remember the winter hit, and these 3 pickup trucks blew by us doing like 110 on like icy, horrible roads, and like 10 minutes later we saw all 3 of them in a pile up off the road.
Yeah, it is exactly what I mean. Exactly what I mean. And how many times do you need to see horrible accidents online? Like there's an entire friggin' TV show dedicated to how dangerous the Coquihalla is in the wintertime. And you still see people drive like they're invincible. You still see people doing idiotic things, like there was a big thing in Victoria just before I left the island and moved back home to Kamloops where, some jerk off in a big pickup truck that, was doing 120 kilometers an hour on a 50-kilometer road, and he sideswiped a police car and killed the female RCMP officer that was. And I like, to me, that when I get upset about death, it's that. It's when arrogance, stupidity, selfishness, and greed take the life of other people. That's when I get upset.
I agree. The one case, it was almost like the story that broke me in that regard was 2008, right when like Jess and I were planning to get married, like we were planning our wedding and all this kind of stuff and to start our family. And then there's the Alan Dwayne Schoenborn murders in Merritt. And he's the guy who killed his 3 children strictly out of spite to get back at his wife and wrote, Forever Young in blood on the walls of the, and that to kill your own kids. Obviously he had mental health issues, but that's not an excuse. He killed his own kids to get back at his wife.
Wow. That's
just, and that to me was just like, it blew my mind. I don't understand as a parent now, like how anyone could do that.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
So one thing that's really helped me, obviously it could help me more because I could have a lower score on this anxiety, was like,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to look at where your highest scores were, right?
Yeah.
Like worrying that you'll be ill for a long time, worrying that your death will be painful. The thought bothering you that you might lose control of your mind before death. Like those 3 were your highest answers. Like that's some pretty cool insight when you think about it.
Yeah. It's more like the loss of facilities leading up to it is the part that scares me. But I pack a coin around with me every day. It's the Memento Mori coin. Memento Mori being, death. Yeah. And it says on the back, you could leave life right now.
Wow.
As a reminder, and that's where like the people who, like we talked about, who drive like idiots, the people who just take their mortality for granted. You are never guaranteed when you wake up that you're going to make it to the end of the day. And when you go to bed at night, there's no guarantee you're going to wake up the next morning. Every day is a gift. Don't squander it. Don't waste time. Don't hold off on all the things you want to do. Tell the people that you love them every day because you don't know. And this has helped me and it continues to help me. And that's something I hope if people take away from this episode is don't fear death. Embrace it and use it to invigorate your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and similar to Jason's coin story there too, like I had a very good friend in the Navy and him and I were talking. I used to smoke 2 packs a day when I was in the Navy, just like a damn chimney. And so I was up in the smoking area up on the upper decks, sitting there on this bench with one of these guys, and he was a Newfoundlander, one of the greatest people I've ever met in my life. His name was Harry Marshall. I don't like putting out people's names, but this gentleman, this Harry deserves it. Harry was He was a legend in the Navy in the West Coast and the East Coast. He used to say that HMCS, which is Her Majesty's Canadian Ship or His Majesty's Canadian Ship, he used to say it stood for Harry Marshall's cruise ship, and all the boats were just on loan, you know, just the greatest guy. And I remember having a conversation with him after my grandmother passed away. We were talking one day and he said to me, he said, you know, Kenton, he said, think of life as a bank account, and what's in that bank account is time. However, this particular bank account, every single one of us is born with a balance that we cannot see. You cannot add time to it. And every minute of every day is a withdrawal. And you'll never know your balance. You'll never know what's left in there. So he said, it's going to happen to all of us. The bank account's going to run out for every single one of us. But the only thing you can do is choose what you spend that time on.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, Harry succumbed to throat cancer a couple years back, passed away from throat cancer. But this man carried a Louis L'Amour book with him everywhere he went. He hand wrote letters to all of his best friends right to the day he died, right? Just a great guy. And for me, with my relationship to death, every time I pass the Highway of Heroes sign in Abbotsford, when I'm driving on the highway, I shut my music off. I look at the sign, and in my head, I list every person that I served with in the Canadian Forces that lost their lives. So I'll never forget them.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. And I'm glad they have that Highway of Heroes here in British Columbia. So, all right. Next week, we talk about the more fun side of death and the way that death is portrayed in popular culture and media.
Yeah.
There's also bummer sides to that, as we'll get into as well. But until then, I am Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Kenton J. Moore.
Get out there and live your life.
Spend your money wisely.